Relatable podcast title SEO for your target audience. This episode is special because this is going to be that episode that you would be able to learn more about in a very unique way. Because if you have a podcast and you're listening to this, I know it's always a struggle. Welcome, SickPod and Danielle. Welcome to Clubhouse too. This is a marketing club, and this is also something I also want to tell you that will help you learn more about this if you listen to this on a podcast or Clubhouse. As people are going to be coming into the room, I know there's going to be a lot of conversations about this, and I felt like this would be the perfect way to talk about how relatable your podcast title should be so that SEO-wise, your target audience can find your show. The reason why a lot of businesses and a lot of podcasts don't succeed is because they don't factor in their podcast titles. They don't factor in their episode titles. They don't factor in their podcast cover art. They don't factor in their episode cover art. When you look at the recommended sizes, the pixels, welcome Michael, for your show, if they say that your show is supposed to have X amount of dimensions or pixels, that's what you need to do. If it requires a certain length, a certain cadence, that's something that's also important to have. So if you have a relatable podcast, then the show is going to show up for you. That's literally what happens with your show. Because most times, this is something that I want to just, bring to your attention. Your target audience only knows what they want to listen to, right? Your target audience only wants to know where they can find the information that they're looking for. So if you have the information that people are looking for, then the best way to do this is by matching your titles and matching your keywords, matching your search intent. Would you search for something that you would find and find your result? How would you search for something that wants to listen to that information would find? So that's where you start to really debunk it and ask yourself, okay, how can I take my podcast from just being a show to actually being a relatable title, a relatable SEO title, a relatable target audience based title? So when you have a relatable podcast allows you to show up in a way that your title and your podcast matches the intent. And one really good way I can actually share with you this, which would be a good one-on-one, is your genre. If you look at your podcast genre, the primary genre, the secondary genre, if you look at those two genres, you would also notice that your primary genre, let's say it's business or entrepreneurship or marketing or food or sports, those are the things that will be very important to have in your podcast title. That's the first thing. So think about it this way. When you think about your podcast show, match your podcast show with your podcast genre. That's one very easy way to start, because sometimes you're not sure what you want it to be. But if you know what you're going to talk about on your show, then how relatable it's going to be based on how people type or how people search. So if I listen to self-improvement podcast shows, right, and that's something that's going to be something that I love to listen to, then I know that I'm going to listen to this show and I'm going to listen to it to know that, okay, this is where I want to grow and learn more about how to have a better outcome or have a better result over time. And I'll even shout out, if you go listen to the Productivity Podcast by Tom Z. Graham, he has an amazing show that can really take you into a place of focus, a place of productivity, a place of your zen, because you're able to really take this to the next level by building out things that you can creatively control, right? So when you think about creating contact and connections, whether it's online, in person, how relatable can you be That's going to be a very big question that you would need to answer too. So if you think about your website, right? This is where your website comes into play, because you can have a relatable podcast title, which is great, but for SEO purposes, your website is going to be one of those anchors that's going to help your podcast grow. There's no way your podcast is going to just grow out of the blue if you don't have anything connected to it from the website standpoint, because there's a section on your website that asks you to put in information about what pages you want people to visit. The same way on your podcast show, people ask what is a website people can go to if they want to learn more about your show. So if your podcast show is not in that section where the website can be seen, then it's going to be hard for your website to also gain that visibility. Because if your website is showing up on Google, that's great. But imagine your website is also showing up on Apple Podcasts because you placed it there. It's https:// the number, fill in the blank. Those are things that we're going to be able to do. If we can find that, and that's the right word, or that's the right search box that requires the right fields to match up to what you have as your domain, then great. Because your domain property is going to be very important. If you don't have those things, if it's not set up well, if it's not connected, it's going to be hard for you to track those things, because over time you'll be missing out on time. So the best thing to do is to think about your business and ask yourself, okay, in 2026, I have a podcast. What is my podcast about? My podcast is about this and that. Okay, go to ListenNotes. I met somebody today who I got to have an interview with. Amazing guy. And I asked him, how did you find my podcast? And he said, ListenNotes. So you can only imagine if you were not on ListenNotes, if you'd have been found on ListenNotes. Welcome, Barbara. So I'm always saying these things because I want you to hear them from me. And as I've heard them so fresh and so genuinely, so authentically, I want to share them with you too. So when you look at your podcast, think about distributing your podcast to different platforms, right? Because if you want to have a relatable podcast title, SEO-wise, you need a website. That's the first step. The second step is to now distribute your podcast across different platforms, right? There are so many platforms you can distribute from, right? You can go to pod.link, That's pod.link. And you can search for any podcast show, and you're going to see all the podcast platforms that are there that you can listen to. Now, that's the listening side. Now, from the listening side to the submission side, you want to take those platforms and then go to Google and type in, let's say, Apple Podcasts. Then you're now typing on Google, Apple Podcasts, RSS feed submission. When you do that for all the platforms that you see there, before you know it, you've submitted all your shows. And now the next step is, okay, I have a baked show. I have things that people can connect with me on. I have information that people can see. What is my keyword looking like? What is my strategy like? Because when you have keywords, especially for podcasting, you have primary keywords and you have secondary keywords, right? Your primary keywords are normally about 3 of them, right? Because if you think about 3 primary keywords for your podcast, if someone says, hey, what's your podcast about? You're going to say it's about this, this, and this. Most times, that's what's mostly going to happen. Or you might say 2 or might say 1. But when you say 3, it's like, okay, I can get the feel of what it is because it feels like it's all complete. So when you have those three are going to fall into 3 different buckets, 3 different genres or 3 different categories. It might be the same genre, but it could be 2 subgenres, right? It could be education and then self-improvement and learning or language, right? So if you now look at those things specifically, if it's relatable, that's where the keyword is, because my podcast may be talking about the same thing yours is, but mine may be relatable because I'm using examples, I'm using case studies, or I'm using something specific that may be different from what you're using. I may be using quizzes, I may be using music, I may be just having a different, style of displaying content. It might be because I use timestamps on my, podcast. It could be anything. So it just depends on how you see that for yourself and how you create it long term. So when you have a website, your website is where you're able to build that visibility. Now from your website, you bring that website and distribute it to different platforms, because those different platforms will have access to your RSS feed where your podcast lives or where your podcast is stemming from. So if you're on your podcast hosting, your website is there, then your website is going to show up in all these distribution platforms that you've sent to. So now the relationship between having a relatable podcast title and also receiving relatable content is good, because if you're getting content that you want to see, it's because you see more content like this. So if my content is about health, food, and I talk about vegetables or fruits, and you like watching that all the time, or you like cooking, and then my episode comes where I have a specific topic that focused on that because it was in the keyword or the title, then that's where it's going to have a play into your platform. So when you think about this long term, your content can end up in somebody's search feed. That's why RSS stands for really simple syndication, right? It's going to really simply syndicate content from wherever it is, and it's going to be refreshed. And the only way your podcast RSS feed is refreshed is when you publish a new episode, or when you update a recent episode published, or even edit the settings of your podcast. You could be changing the genre, you could be changing the cover image, you could be changing something. And very soon I might change the cover image of the podcast show. So that's going to happen very soon. We'll see. And I'm excited about this because it's never changed since we started in 2019, which is 7 years this August. So August 12th, 2026 is going to be 7 years on the podcast show, the We Don't Play podcast show. So shout out to the We Don't Play podcast show, and thank you for listening and being here too. So I hope this is helping you and making sense. So if you have a website, create blogs. I've talked about have a website, have distribution, and then have blogs. That's going to be your sandwich. I can call it your sandwich and your potatoes. And I can call it your meat pie and your gravy and your suya and your jollof rice and all the good food and sushi, all the good stuff. If you love that food, and seafood, all that good stuff. If you love steak, let's talk about it. Welcome up there. So when you think about it, right, as a business, your goal is to build relationships online. So this sandwich I'm talking about is when you have a website, you have a domain, you have access to all these platforms, right? Because you've connected to Google Search, you've connected to Microsoft, you've connected to all these different platforms, right? Now, when you've connected to these platforms, the next step is, okay, now that we're connected, what's the next step? Now let's distribute. So we start distributing content to where we've established our presence, right? It wouldn't make sense for you to put gas in a car and leave the car in the driveway or leave the car in the garage. You're going to use that gas to drive and to move because you need to make moves. So when you do the same thing with your website, you build a website, you control and you build the engine, you put it all together. It now has a strong, welcome Dave, it has a strong entrance. It has a strong presence. Because now what happens is that because you have content that's within that ecosystem, because you're building like plants, you're building seeds, you're planting seeds, you're creating content, you're building links. These links are going to start germinating to queries. That's why I love thinking about queries and pages. Queries to me is like this. I love using analogies, right? So queries to me is like seeds in the ground, right? Because seeds in the ground would be if you eat a mango or an orange, right? You're going to get seeds, and those seeds are going to be more than, if you count the number of seeds in the fruit, you're going to have 3 seeds, 6 seeds, or however many seeds. It's going to be always more than the fruit, right? Because your seeds will be more than the fruit, right? So you can have more than the unit. So when I'm giving this example is because you have a website, your website can now give more content. Welcome, Adam. Your website can always give more content because your website is a machine. It's the platform that is standing. It's very sturdy. So now you have a long-term plan where you have a website domain that is accessible and indexable on search engines. That can be seen. So you have an engine that you can build. If you have a V12 engine or a V6 or whatever engine you have, a hybrid or electric car, you're going to be able to drive based on that capacity and the horsepower of that car, right? So if your house is your website online and your website is connected to all these horsepowerful platforms like Google, where you have a search engine that has long-term effects. You have a blog that's 24 months out, you can have content out there. Same thing applies to your website. So if you think about all these things and you add them up, eventually you're like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I can actually build it this way and actually take it to the next level. So when you have a podcast, it does the same thing for you because you have a website. You've now built within this website an engine. So let's say you have 10 episodes as a podcast. And these 10 episodes are talking about, let's talk about social media marketing or SEO marketing. Or in this case, we're talking about podcast, title SEO. Or how do you use your audience within your podcast to find your target market, which is possible. Just think about it. Relatable podcast title SEO. This is really it. Because if you distribute and do all these things and you start writing content, you start building capacity, you're not allowing people to come to your website, because the only way someone can come to your room or come to your website or come to your inbox is if you send something out. So you have to, you can't receive if you don't give. You need to give to receive. So for you to receive, you need to receive in abundance by giving in abundance first. So that giving requires you to give content, give information, whether it's an article, a video, a picture, a tutorial, a table, something that they can use, they can print out, they can scribble, they can highlight. That's why books do so well, because books have so much information in there. Videos, film, they have so much content in there. So when you give people information, it's so good. I had a client today that we were having a conversation, and he's doing so well. He literally jumped from the top 300,000 podcast shows to the top 50. Top 50. So now I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And this happened within about 3 weeks. So imagine in 3 weeks, we've been able to build out a strategy that I've been able to say, okay, now I understand how this works, because I said I'm going to do a test run. And podcasting is fun because it's every 24 hours, unlike SEO, where you may have to wait 30 days, you have to wait for the crawl, you have to wait for it, whether it's manual or automatic. Even if you crawl it today and it has been submitted, you still have to wait for the submission to be indexed and also received and then signaled and then rendered. It's a whole lot of process when you think about SEO long term. So it's not just crawling. There's crawling, there's indexing, and there's rendering. Just like when you're rendering a CapCut video, or you're rendering a Photoshop video or Photoshop photo, or I can call it a Premiere. I'm thinking about Adobe products right now, Premiere Video. And if you have Premiere Pro and you're putting all these things together, you have time to render. So if you're rendering an MP4 or you're rendering an MOV, you have all these things that are going to be rendered at a certain time based on how long this thing is. So imagine if you have a 4-hour movie or a 2-hour movie or a 30-minute movie or a 90-minute movie, and you're rendering that whole movie from start to finish. It may take you 2 days. It may take you 2 hours, right? It may take you 20 minutes, depending on how much you have in your RAM, right? So all that capacity is going to render. So imagine that rendering and that actual fact. Rendering is the same rendering that's happening to Google. So it may take 30 minutes for it to render, right? There's something called TTL on your DNS. That stands for time to load on your domain name server. Whenever you hear DNS, that's where technically I can call it the nervous system of your website, right? The sitemap is the brain of your website, and the DNS is the nervous system, because that's where everything is coming from, right? You have all the codes, all the keys, all the text, all the canonical tags. There's so much happening there that you have to really look at the intricate stuff that's going to help your business grow, right? Where you think about doing anything that's going to be related to your emails. Even when you send out emails, that inbox, that MX record, that mail exchange record is going to be very important too. So anything you're doing SEO-wise is going to be factored back into your website. So there's nothing that you will do that will not involve your website, right? So don't think I can just do a podcast without a website. At some point, you're going to need to have a website. And if you don't have a website early, it's going to be hard for you to scale, because you'll need that website to build authority. Because if ChatGPT is ranking your podcast from Apple, and then you have another listing on Shopify, which maybe now turns into your website that lives on Shopify, right? For example, now you have a website that is yours, And now you also have Spotify. So you have a website that you've built on Shopify or WordPress or Wix or wherever. And you also have your email that is doing well because you're sending out emails to people that within your community. And that's also sending signals back into the algorithm. Welcome, April. So as you're creating more and more content, because you're publishing more articles, and these articles are coming in the form of show notes, which are coming in the form of links, then guess what's happening? If you have 10 episodes, you have 10 links. That means you have 20 links. Why? And you may even have more than 20, because for every one episode, your show is showing up on at least 10 platforms. Welcome. Think about it. Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, SiriusXM, ListenNotes, Castbox. There's so many out there. I'm just giving you, that's 7 already. And there's way more out there that people listen to podcasts. Even this Podcast Addict is there too. There's Castbox. There is Neurocast. There are so many platforms people use. And I'm like, how, even there's YouTube. People listen to your podcast on YouTube. So there's so many platforms. So how do you really know where your target audience is when they're everywhere? That's usually the problem. But the goal is, if you're able to focus on the main 4, welcome, Cool Christian, welcome. When you think about where you're showing up online, right? The top 4 for podcasts is Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and that's in no order at all. They are all strong platforms that your podcast would need to be on to have a strong dominance, right? Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and YouTube Music specifically, because YouTube Music is connected to YouTube Podcast, right? You have the YouTube app, right? And you also have the YouTube Music app. So those are 2 different apps too. So, and there's also YouTube Studio. So when you look at all these different platforms, they all serve different purposes, right? Welcome, Fabian. So for you to have a relatable podcast title SEO for your target audience, you need to match your podcast episodes with your podcast genre. In other words, whatever your genre of your show is, whatever semantics that's going to cover your show, it needs to be present in every episode. Because you may have 50 episodes, but maybe 2 of those episodes are focusing on your target audience. Why? Because the words that you targeted in that episode, even if you talked about it in the other 48, but it was not mentioned or printed in explicitly on your actual title, then you're not going to get that audience because they are searching for something and not sharing else. So the match is not a 1-to-1, it's a 1-to-0. So I hope that gives you like a good, feedback as well on that. Fabian, thanks for being here, man. How are you? We'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, and contribution. The floor is yours.
Man, the pleasure is mine, Favour. One of the best to do it, man. I always learn something when I jump into your rooms, man. Thanks for having one on this Friday evening. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, brother. Thanks for being here, man. How's everything going on your end? And welcome, John.
It's going, man. It's I have a podcast, Game Changers with Fabian Lyon. I'm always fascinated about making that emotional contact with potential, not only guests, but the audience members, man. So I have a couple questions for you, Favour. The first one is, what is maybe one of the biggest misconceptions out there as it relates to the topic at hand?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say one of the biggest misconceptions about podcasting is that, this is going to be a big one, that your podcast is a cash machine. I'm going to say that in a different way. One of the major misconceptions that I see about podcasting, because it's going to be 7 years for me podcasting this August, and I have seen a lot, and I still yet to see a lot more. I'm yet to see, I barely haven't seen anything yet. And I've looked at 600 episodes published, And I'm asking myself, okay, what is out here and what is the goal? What is the exchange? What is the value? What do people do? Some people, you have to pay $10 to be in the podcast. So you have to pay $100 upfront or whatever you have to pay. It's usually something that people do, which is cool. But people say, okay, I'm going to monetize my podcast and grow. But in my mind, I'm like, what are you actually monetizing? Is it the show? Or is it the business? Is it the people? What is the real impact and exchange here? So conceptually, I see podcasting as a way of building connections with people and building relationships that extend beyond the now. And the misconception is that people think that if I just drop an episode or two, then that's about it. Yet there are so many episodes out there in the world that say the same thing you do. So how will yours show up before anyone else's? And it's going to be based on relevance. That's why I was talking about relatable podcasts, because people are not podcasting for relevance sake. They're podcasting for leisure sake most times. And if they're doing it for business, they're doing it well, but there are better ways to always do something, right? And if you're doing it for leisure and you expect to monetize from it or do it as a business and want to monetize, if there's a way you're doing it that's not structural, then it's going to be very hard for you to scale, especially when you have a backlog. Because sometimes you end up at episode 100 or 200 and you realize, oh, I've been doing this wrong my whole 2 years, 3 years. Now I got to go back and do this all over again. And it's tasking. So the last thing you want to do is go back in time when you could go forward. So that's what I see as a misconception. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Fabian.
No, that's some good stuff there, man. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of them, and with so much, we're obviously in the information age now, and we have been for a while, and you can really have your head on a swivel. We're in 4.5 years now with Game Changers, but it just seems to be always evolving, and also just trying to not change yourself, man, but just to be aware of what's happening. Let me ask you this: what is maybe one or two most common mistakes that you see, Favour, every day, as far as podcasting goes?
For podcasting, I need to do a whole episode on that actually, because I can break it down into so many ways. But I would say one or two things I see as a big mistake and they're so underrated. I'm actually going to use these two because I know people are going to say, okay, how do you do this, do that? There's so many ways to do podcasting. So I'm not even going to go into the creative side. I'll go into the technical side. The two most underrated places within podcasting is your image file size and extension, and also your file name extension. Those are two underrated mistakes, and I would say costly mistakes that cause your podcast not to grow. Why? Because when you have a podcast, you're uploading an MP3 or you're uploading an MP4, just like if it's a video audio, just like when you have when you have a YouTube video or YouTube channel and you're uploading your MP4, right? When you're uploading that MP4 is going to be your video file. And if that video file is not in the right keyword that it was meant to be, and now it looks like abc.mp4, then it's not going to fly because it's not going to even register, and no AI search engine bot is going to read that and understand what that is. So it's going to be a big defect. And then even image wise, not just the image file, but your image size. Because you may be uploading your podcast and it's 300 by 300 pixels when you're supposed to do 3000 by 3000 pixels. So you're doing 10% of the available market. So when you look at it like that, it's like, okay, what are we really doing with our podcasting? That's why I don't usually talk about like how do you do your titles or your covers or your things. I don't play with that because that is 100% your creativity. But when it comes to the technical setup, if that is not secure, if you build a house on sinking sand, at some point it's going to sink. So I'd rather save you now than later, because that way you're able to start strong. Because these are things that I learned also along the way. I didn't go to a podcast school or to learn that. I did this on my own. God helped me to just build this. And now I'm 7 years in this August with 620 plus episodes. My goal is to get to 700 episodes by August, and I'm already at 620 by February. So I already know the formula, and I'm like, okay, so if I do 20 episodes a month, I'll be at, I'll be at 700 by come April, May, before August, which is 3 months ahead of my schedule. So I now know that, okay, if I'm able to do this, and I know that the podcast has a lifespan of anywhere between 1 to 5 months, and whatever I'm doing between now, the next 5 months from now, I don't need to talk about it because I already talked about it then. So the most underrated are your image file size, with, of course, your file name and your file actual size, the MP3 or the MP4 that you upload, which will have a file name attached to it. So that's what I would say. What are your thoughts?
I've never actually put so much thought into it, man, but it makes a lot of sense. Do you want to share maybe your biggest mistake, Favour, or maybe your biggest misconception going in to the business that you're like, man, now you hold a totally different view on it? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Oh yeah, totally. I made so many mistakes, and I'm so glad I made those mistakes early, because if I was making those mistakes now, I would be dreading. I would be livid. So I'm glad I was able to make them early, and learn them early enough for me to show. And that's why I always say when I'm showing podcasts or teaching or helping or coaching or implementing or even working with you as a client, we can be able to build that relationship and also show you that curve all the way to the top. And one mistake that I made, which was and is and will be, if you still do this, which is very detrimental, is and we're talking about titles today, and I see your question, cool, I'll answer this as well. Is one mistake I made is putting the words episode before the actual episode. In other words, I didn't put the context of the keyword at the beginning. Mo is like, here we go. I didn't put it at the beginning because I used to do episode 001 - introduction to social media marketing. That's not the episode title, but that's what it would look like in a very natural setting, because you want to have a naming convention that is very simple to follow. Yeah, but contextually, you've wasted about 50% of your pixel size, because if you look at words have pixels. A capital W and a small w have two different pixel sizes. Capital and small letters, that's why when you send an email, the email comes in a pixel size. It may say 52 kilobytes, but that's a size. Your website may say you have a page worth 2 megabytes. That's a size, right? That's how heavy your book is. So a web page is technically a book. So when I did episodes in the beginning, I would be putting AGE, which is something I still do today. It's aspiring global entrepreneurs, but I would put that at the beginning of my actual title. This is something I actually did. And I was like, I'll put brackets, A.G.E, close brackets, then space, hyphen, space, and then I now type in what I'm doing. And I was like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, but who's going to be typing age for a podcast episode about a specific topic? So that's when I had to switch gears. And those things, yeah, Cool says nobody thinks about these things. That's crazy. Yeah, because why I say this so importantly is because it's your podcast title. It's your episode title. There's a difference between your podcast title and your episode title. Your podcast title is your actual show. Your episode title is what runs. So I always say your podcast title is like your back two wheels of a car, and your episode titles are your front two wheels of the car. Because wherever your episode is going to run to, drive to, traffic-wise, engagement-wise, download-wise, unique listen-wise, is going to come from that place. So I thought about it and I said, I can't be putting AGE here. So what do I do now? If you listen to my podcast, it's called We Don't Play. Click the link above. You will see the episodes there as well. And when you scroll down, you'll actually see the show itself in real time. And you'll see the episodes, you'll see the titles, you see how they're very specific. When I have a featured guest, I don't even put my name on the title anymore. I put it within my own solo episodes. But if I have a featured guest, I'm going to put their name first, even before their title or before their topic. Why? Because when you look at the algorithm, person comes before type. If you look at just the way things are, person is before type. Just like with branding, you're going to do branding and then there's non-branding, right? If I'm looking for jackets, then I'm going to look for a specific type of jacket from a certain brand. If I'm going to look for that type of brand jacket. So if I'm looking for the same thing, if I'm typing or I'm looking for almond milk, okay, you're going to get different types of brands. If I'm looking for self-improvement podcast tips, I'm going to get episodes from there. So if my episode was saying episode 125, then a whole different conversation, and then the person's name is at the end, and then the context is at close to the end, then I'm missing the whole point completely. So what I do now is I put the name in the beginning. At the very beginning, that's the name, and then full colon, and then I put the information about that person. And then also think about the pixels, right? When you have pixels, you also have characters involved, right? Right now with YouTube, it's about 40 characters. That's safe zone. Yes, with Google, it's about 60, 65 characters with spaces. But when you also have a podcast show, that also matters. But there are no rules. You can still do it. No one's saying that you should limit your words into a bracket, but do it in a way that if somebody is going to use that link and click on that link, your name is there, your brand is there, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, if you really have to name your episodes, which is what we do for our clients as well, and I said, hey, okay, if we have to really name your episodes or number them, we're going to do them at the end. We're going to do that at the very end. So if your episode is episode 2, it would be -002 at the very end, not anywhere close to the text. Because if I put that 002 at the beginning, I've completely filtered out everything else coming after that. It's kind of like saying, hey, I love your shoes, but everything I've said before has been negated. So it's kind of like putting it that way when you do it that way online. So it's better for you to just put it at the end rather at the beginning. Does that help, Fabian?
A whole lot, man. And that's a reminder that what are we leaving on the table, man? You know, especially now where we are fighting for the attention more than ever of audience members. And that little thing, by doing what you just said, you know what I mean? You can obviously utilize everything within our power now to draw somebody's attention. And these are maybe some of the things that are small, but they actually loom large in the big picture, man. So thanks for bringing that to light. And let's get Mo Dub in here, man. Mo Dub, what's up, man?
What's good?
No tea, brother. What's up, John? Thanks for bringing me up, Favour.
Any comments? What are your thoughts? John, anyone can go. We'd love to hear from you. What are you thinking?
Well, first.
Well, I'm just Mo. What's up? Yeah, you want to go, or we want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead and go. You're my favorite. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just enjoying listening to this, thinking about it, and let's address Mr. Cool down there. Says nobody thinks about these things. That's crazy. Well, obviously, there are people that think about them because we're talking about it, and it's good to talk about it because it's a way to get the search bots and LLMs and people to understand when you have eyeballs on it. So yes, it is relative, Mr. Cool. So one of the things that really stood out to me was relatable, right? I just heard somebody say, so if you're doing YouTube, right, you can pair this with YouTube or podcasts, and specifically this is with titles, right? Title, it's like think title SEO, right? Think how, like, let's just remove the platform. If you want to get something, if you want someone to read something or to pay attention to something, what do? You have to hook them. You have to get their attention. You have to grab what they think or what they're thinking, right? And was interesting, this guy said, everyone knows the Diary of his, well, I shouldn't say if you don't know, there's a really big podcast who he started in the UK. It's the Diary of a CEO. And so he has a YouTube channel, but basically it's just interviewing, right? Just interviewing. And now obviously it's on YouTube. And so he does the video interview. But what's interesting, he said, was he interviews a lot of people. If you just go to his channel, he interviews billionaires and millionaires and these people. But he interviewed this one person like 6 times because people were attracted to his content because they were, Favour, get ready for it, relatable. So you'd think, oh, they're going to interview, this famous person. Oh, that should get a lot of views, right? That should get a lot of listens, whatever you want to call it, metrics. But people listen because you're relatable. So how can we be relatable using words in the title, right? I think that's where people need to understand. It's like, this is not, sometimes you think you hear these like really deep subjects. It's like, oh my gosh, does that even matter? And yeah, it does matter because you want to be relatable. Like, what if I said, name, let's just call it Favour, and Favour, we'll just go with Smith. Favour Smith. What's a good word? Some type of verb, right? So Favour, then last name, and then verb, or discusses, or some type of like vulnerability. Like if I tell you my vulnerability, if I'm honest with you, I'm more relatable. And that is something that people need to understand, right? So if I come up to you and I'd be like, hey, you know what's going on in my life? I'm dealing with teenage stuff, which is true. I'm dealing with teenagers, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I deal with this? That's me being relatable. If you have a teenager and you're going through stuff, I instantly connect with you, right? And so using relatable titles for your target audience, and like even Favour what you did here with relatable podcast title SEO for your target audience, you will get more listeners because you're trying to be. Now if you do the title, you're relatable, but then the actual the interview goes sideways, that's a whole different story. But anyways, that's kind of my 2 cents.
I love that, John. Thank you for bringing that up. There's a lot of relatable information that you look at. I was actually looking at this earlier, and me and someone were looking at this earlier. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and I was literally looking at the top podcasters. I was like, let me sit back for a little bit and just say, who are the top podcasters in the world? Like the Joe Rogans, the Mel Robbins, the Steve Barnett's, these guys are doing so well, right? And they're out there and they're doing it very specifically to their niche. Even Alex Hormozi, shout out to all these amazing guys and women too who are really going in at it. And I looked at their podcast show from 2 angles. One angle was from the search and the other one was from social. So the one from search, and this is also to your question, cool, as well. How do you stay consistent? And if your podcast is just audio or video and just audio, I think audio is best if you don't have the time to do video every time, which is way better. And then you can do audio in between if you have to. But audio is much better and transmits faster because not every platform actually receives in video codec. Most platforms receive audio codec. In other words, they receive MP3s. And let's say you have a podcast and you upload it as a video, which we do for clients. You upload a video and that video is showing up on Spotify as a video because it's a video episode, which you can convert to audio on your Spotify player. But on Apple, it's going to be a direct audio file. It's not going to be the video version. So instead of you thinking about what to do with video, if you don't have time for video, do audio. I have 620 episodes right now. These video versions of them, yes, if they would have replays or would have interviews attached, but majorly I would say 90% of them, if not 80% of them, are audio. And when they're audio, people can listen to them, they can subscribe, and I get to hear from so many people. I met someone today. I had an interview with him. I was talking about it earlier. I asked him, how did you find me? He sent me an email. Today is what, Friday? He sent me an email, I think, on Tuesday. It's like, hey, I just love your episode. I'd love to connect with you and be on the show and talk about, my business and everything. And we had a call today. So I asked him, hey, how did you find me? He said, ListenNotes. I said, wow, that's the first time ever. And I said, what did you look for? And I always tell this with clients. I always say, please ask your clients, your customers, whoever you're connecting with as a business, is just due diligence to find out how did they find you. From a church, whatever level it is, how did you find me? Because the answers they will give you will be so unique that you're not going to run ads to get that same type of result because it's very unique to the experience. That tells me, how did you find me? He sorted it out by relevance. Who is a relevant podcast about this? He was looking for entrepreneurship, AI, SEO, marketing. And that's where my podcast showed up. And he was like, I'll connect with this person. And that's how he emailed me. And now we have a call again next week because we're now going to actually work together because we're building something. And I've seen what he's working on, which is really exciting for his business. He does things like handwritten emails. That is so unique. So I'm like, I don't know these people, but now I'm connecting with them because of this intentionality. Imagine if my podcast was episode 560. Who cares? Nobody cares how many episodes you have. What they care about is what you're saying. Is that information valuable at the time they need it? And if they need it, then how are they receiving it? Because I was having a conversation with another client today, and we actually figured out that most of his clients listen to his podcast in the car when they're doing laundry in the kitchen. Yeah, laundry or kitchen. And when they're in the dark. That was the one that shocked us the most. So when you start hearing things like this, it's no longer about me. It's all about you. So when you now change the focus on relatable content, and then you now use that to reverse engineer, it's beautiful. So don't just do episode 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do those, but what are we actually talking about? And how many episodes can you say over and over with the same context, but not to be redundant, but to be more emphatic and also be more connection based as opposed to just topic based? Because everyone can talk about ChatGPT and Perplexity and what's the latest tool in town, but the reason why someone's going to listen to you over the other person is because of how you deliver. There's something called visibility score in SEO for podcasting. It's called visibility score, and it ranks from 0 to 10. And this means if it ranks from 0 to 10, it's like your IMDB rating. That's why I usually tell people now. It's the easiest way for me to explain this. It's your IMDB rating. If you see a movie and that IMDB rating is a 4.5, let's say, or even just a 4, you're not going to watch that movie. You might watch it if you have time, but you're not going to consider that first. But if you have an IMDB rating of 7, 8, 9, you're going to be like, I want to watch that movie like yesterday. I got to watch it 2 times, 3 times because it's that good. So there's something called a visibility score for your podcast, and it ranges from 0 to 10. So the higher your visibility score is, the more potential you're getting. So all these top podcasters I've mentioned, they're all having an IMDB rating or visibility score above 7.0 and above. Just like with domain rating. If you have domain rating over 90 to 100, that's big. So in the podcast world, if I can put it that way, it's from 7.0 to 10.0. So when you have your IMDB rating within that range, that's good because 7.0 means you have a strong audience, you have a strong signal, and you have strong content. That means if you have 50 episodes last year because you missed Thanksgiving and Christmas week, then now all those 50 episodes are still be listening to today. We're in February. If you talked about love, romance, relationships, topics, whatever your podcast is about, whether it's, scriptural based, whether it is creative based, whether it is inspirational based, it's all going to capture within the timing that people are searching for it. So when people are listening to your podcast, they look at the timestamp and then they look at the topic. If the timestamp is recent, cool, check. If the topic is relevant, cool, because they're not going to listen to an episode that is relevant but was dated back 10 years ago. So people are going to think about that first, just like with any other thing. You'd watch a movie that's 2026 than watching a movie that's 2006. Unless you have time to watch that movie, great. But you're rather going to spend money on a 2026 blockbuster movie. So when you look at it like that, it changes everything, as opposed to kind of like saying, I just want to do a podcast. Because the podcast I'm talking about is a show. And yes, definitely, I can't wait to connect with you again, for sure. Thanks, cool. When you look at the long-term effect of your podcast, it's so different. I'm going to give you guys a case study, a live case study right now. I'm going to update my phone so that you guys can see this camera, this picture. Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can get this snapshot. Boom. All right, so cool. All right, so pull to refresh, guys. You just pull down to refresh. You're going to see my picture. Now you're going to see a blue line, a very blue line. If you guys can see it, please put a 1 in the chat. And cool is very possible to be consistent. Trust me. Like, if you think about how much time, I'm going to tell you this part. That's why I want to show you this, because I think this will inspire you. If you really think about it, guys, anybody can start a podcast and anybody can do this. It just takes discipline, consistency, and patience. Discipline, consistency, and patience. If you can have those 3, you are good. I'm 100%, because I'm telling you, I'm still doing podcasting today. I'm not using it to, I'm using it to connect with people. I'm not using it to make money. I'm not using it to look for sponsors. I'm using it to make connections. And I always said my podcast, the reason why I want to start a podcast or why I started it is so I can connect with people. There's no way I'm on Clubhouse today if it wasn't for the podcast that I started back in 2019. So it's that specific as well. So I wanted to just give you that idea as well. So when you look at this, I don't know if you guys, what's DC? Okay, I like how you put it, DCP. I love that. I love how you put it that way. I mean, if you can remember that way, please do, because I want you guys to see this, because that discipline, it's painful, but it's a growing pain that you will be happy that you went through. Like, imagine if I stopped my podcasting, imagine how many episodes I would have done. Last year I did about 174 episodes or so, and I'm like, okay, so that technically means I do on average 100 episodes a year. That's technically 2 episodes a week. So if you really have 24 hours in a day, how much time do you really have for long-term effectiveness? That's how I see it. Because if you look at my picture, this is a client right now, and the top competitor is Mel Robbins' podcast. So we're looking at that, and right now she's ranking today she's ranking 5th place. This is out of 4 million shows in the world. So I'm able to see, like, from the top down to the very last person. So when I'm using this, you can see this ranking chart. When you see this, as far as like the last 3 weeks, the client was in the top 300,000 range, and now he's in the top 50,000 range. And guess what? He only drops about 50 to, I would say, 25 to 30 seconds worth of content, to the point where now even AI is telling him that we discovered this today, that people are looking for more time. People need more time. So it's so interesting to see this thing. So I'm really excited to share this with you. Hey, Sunny, we'd love to hear from you. Happy Friday.
I was just hoping for a little piece of context here. This is really great information, by the way. When you say podcast, what do you mean by that? And I might have already missed that, but do you mean like a full 30-minute segment, or what do you mean by that? Thank you.
When I say podcast?
Yes, podcast episode. Do you mean like a 20-minute, 5-minute? Is it video? Is it video with just...
I see. Thank you, Sunny. Okay, so I'll break it down into two sides so that it's clear. So which one do you want me to start off with, audio or video?
Sorry, I'm in my car. I'm asking you, like what?
As telling you what
Oh,
between the two.
yeah. Okay, video,
Video.
video.
Yeah. All right. So I would have chosen audio. So you see, it's glad. And this is perfect. And I'm glad that you said video too, because if you look at the screenshot on my profile, that's a video podcast that's doing that ranking that you see up there. So video does faster than audio, yes. But even though if you have a video, somebody can see, you know, that no like trust factor, it's much faster there. So he's now in the top 50K podcast shows, at least the top 100K podcasts out of 4 million in the last 2-3 weeks. So now the episodes that you're seeing that's making this happen, his episode in the last 2-3 weeks, he's been dropping episodes that are about 30 seconds, 25 seconds. They're not long. And none of them is above 60 seconds. So, and they're video. It's literally hit the camera, record, talk, publish, upload, you're good. There are timestamps. It's on YouTube Shorts. It's everywhere.
Okay, so kind of like a short, like a YouTube.
Exactly. So you're taking your YouTube Short into a podcast index.
Okay, thank you.
Audio. So when you have that, you're now putting your content within a proprietary position of, I can say, prominence, for lack of a better word, because now you're not depending on youtube.com to show you up on a podcast. You have everywhere else to be on that your podcast is available through, that anyone can come to your show and find the same thing, that their relevance is within that scorecard. They'll find you there. So your focus is to look at your visibility score and see, okay, how much time am I putting into my visibility? And visibility equals, if we do the algebra backwards, right? Visibility equals consistency, right? I know we've talked about the DCP, courtesy of Sunny, with the discipline, consistency, and patience. When you now look at your visibility long-term, right? When you have episodes that are connecting the same dots through and through, it's bigger. Think about it like shorts. That's why they created something called a related video. When you create a short, before you publish that short, it's going to say add related video. That's because if I watch this video and I like it, I want to watch a related video from the same channel. So I keep watching 30-second related videos within a 2-minute cycle, within a 5-minute cycle, and I have 5 to 10 videos that have been chopped up or built up that people can watch on YouTube, but still watch on their podcast, because YouTube is public, podcast is private. So that's the difference. You can have a YouTube playlist and watch on TV. That's great. But you're going to be in the gym or taking a walk or taking your dog on a walk, or you're going to be having on the beach, having a pina colada or something, and you're going to be having a playlist that's going to be 40 minutes within a playlist on Spotify. Or your podcast player, some people use Podcast Addicts, some people use Chrome browser, which I got to see recently too. So you wonder, okay, people use Chrome browser, that means they're on a website. So all these things are so very specific that if you're able to just look at your podcast titles and focus on consistency within the discipline of creating content that they can actually enjoy, listen to, whether it's 30-second audio or 30-second video, either way it goes, they're going to listen to it. And you'll actually start realizing that they'll want more content from you, because you start noticing that there's more downloads within those short spans. So that's also a very good signal to tell you that, hey, we need to expand this more. So there are many ways you can do podcast titling, but using SEO as a target audience market reach is good for you, because your episodes and your titles are going to come from that stretch. And there are 5 things that are very important that before we go, I want to make sure that you can hear this too. And I'd love to hear from you too as well, Mo. So when I look at this podcast that we're talking about with titles, right? There's something called, this is what I call it. There's something called I can call it the Rubik's Cube of podcasting, right? Because there are 5 slots that you have to fill in every time you publish an episode, because that's going to also boost your podcast overall. The first one is your title. The second one is your author. The third one is your description. The fourth one is your episode title. The fourth one is your episode description. So you have a podcast title, which is what we're talking about today. We've not talked about the author. We've not talked about description, episode titles, which is different from podcast titles, and episode descriptions, which is different from podcast descriptions. And then there's another layer, which is podcast cover art and episode cover art. So when you start looking at all these different Rubik's Cubes to make up one show, you can tell that you have a lot of elements. Just like with Instagram, you have reels, you have stories, you have notes, you have this, you have that, you have posts. You can do a lot within that capacity. And then even within your podcast, you have trailers, you have bonuses, you have full episodes. So not many people use all these different things because we don't use them in an episodic way, if I can call it that way, because we're not putting them within different categories. So even if you don't put episode 5, the fact that you tagged it under season 2, episode 5 in your indexing, you don't have to worry about whether it is episode 200 or 500. But if you like to see the numbers, then that's great too. So that's one thing you can definitely look at. Mo, we'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the topic today? Mo, if you're speaking, you're muted. Want to say something?
Yeah, Favor. I don't know if you have the time now, but I'm always amazed by people with great content without a great following, and people with, I'd say, unspectacular content. Like, I'll just give you a scenario. A grandma peeling potatoes in her kitchen in Idaho gets 500,000 followers. And you got, on the flip side, you have somebody with some great content, great guests, and I'd like for you to speak on likability, because I think we don't speak on that, and we always talk about SEO and obviously content. But can you talk about maybe the likability factor when you're hosting? Thank you.
Definitely. The likability factor is I feel like that one is 100% dependent on you. It's kind of like saying, I can get you the job, but can you do the work? You know what I mean? So it gets to that point because and I heard this from Dr. Miles Monroe. I got to give credits to where it's due. I heard this clearly, and it made a lot of sense. It says, and this is also general too on terms, your job is your employment, your work is your deployment. So when you are someone that is being deployed to work for humanity, for service, for people, for family, for anything that you do, because the first business God created is family. So if you're someone that is liked, then someone will just naturally like you because of how you say things, who you are. People work with people that they know, like, and trust. So that likability is, you can have a great show. Like, we can be talking about SEO. A lot of people talk about SEO. A lot of people. But there are people who would like to hear SEO from someone as opposed to somebody else because they just like the way this person says it or talks, or maybe they feel connected. Someone else might say, hey, for you to answer this question, I got to book a call with me and pay this, or whatever they say. That now builds, I'll call it builds friction rather than building bridges. So those things happen and you wonder, okay, why are these things happening and why can't you just have a normal conversation, right? Because you just don't know when at some point someone may say, hey, I like this person, I'll refer them to somebody I know, or anything, because you're building that relationship. You're not trying to look at everybody as a client or look at everybody as a lead, because that's when you'll actually be misled, really, because now you lose a connection, deeply with the person that you want to be liked with or be liked of. So when you now looked at the long-term visibility mindset as a podcast, how you can be liked is how your show shows up, right? Because your show may just be quiet the whole time, but you might have music. Like for me, my podcast has music. I'm a producer, I'm a drummer, self-taught. I'll always produce jingles and music for clients and also for music purposes. So I know every season has a different sound. And then every year, Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, Spotify podcast will send you your Wrapped every year. and they'll say, oh, here's the top genre that people that listen to your podcast, they like rock music, they like Afrobeat, they like country music. You're going to see all those kind of things there. So you'll know, oh, okay, they like this. Okay, so I'm going to add this to my intro. I'm going to add this. So likability is not just your title, because SEO is great, right? But if I have great SEO, but no discipline, I have no consistency, I have no patience with the person, myself, with God, then who am I really doing this for? So when I look at it from the long-term perspective, that ball is in the court of the person that is going to address that. But to be liked, that requires earning, and that requires time too. So I think that likability is very important, but it's also a factor that most people underrate too. Great question, Fabian. This is great. And also, Sunny, thank you for the question as well today. Mo, thanks for being here. Go ahead,
That was
Fabian.
that was fire. Thank you for dropping that. That was good.
If you look at all these quadrants and just look at them and say, okay, how can I fill these buckets? Okay, I have a podcast title, check. I have a podcast description, check. How many characters is it? Check. Just like, okay, I gotta tie my shoelaces, check. I gotta wear this socks. How many socks I gotta wear? So when you start looking at it from a very intricate, meticulous standpoint, you realize, wow, I'm missing out on all this data, because YouTube gives you 5,000 characters with spaces. Podcast gives you about 4,000 characters with spaces. Some platforms truncate it at some point, but some keep it full because it's a web page. So if you have show notes that's 5,000 characters or 4,000 characters, then all that information that is in there is linkable, it's clickable, it's indexable, because on their websites, they're showing their website, your podcast, and your link is there.
Favour, I just thought of a question for you. I noticed, like on my YouTube channel that I have, that they recently have added a podcast tab in there. I haven't uploaded anything inside of it in the dashboard. Is there a minimum length requirement, or like if you upload that 60 or a 60-second or a 30-second bite, does it automatically put it in under shorts, or are you allowed to upload a 30-second bite, for example, up under the podcast tab?
Great question. So with the podcast, it's different completely from the shorts, because the thing is, YouTube dropped this, I think it was a year or two ago. It's now youtube.com/podcast. So podcasts on YouTube have their own specific algorithm, channel, and discovery. That's why there's a YouTube app and there's also a YouTube music app. So now when you look at these two apps, they do completely different things, yet they're one and the same thing. Because one is giving you music, is giving you playlists, is giving you an experience, kind of like you get with Spotify and Apple, where your podcast can also be seen, just like with Amazon Music, there's YouTube Music. So when you're looking at all these different components, they're kind of like all tied in together. So now with your YouTube video, you're uploading that directly to YouTube as a short. So that's going to end up in the short section. Now the podcast section, they've created that because let's say you don't have a podcast on Apple or Spotify, then you can have a podcast on YouTube. But that's not, I would say, not the way to do it, because you'd rather publish that video as a short and then create a podcast show and then submit your RSS feed to your YouTube podcast feed. That way you're able to now hit publish, and every time you hit publish, your podcast literally pushes notifications to your audience that you have a show on YouTube, because your RSS feed is synced. So that means if YouTube has a copy, Apple has a copy, Spotify has a copy, SiriusXM has a copy, Pandora has a copy, your website has a copy. So everyone has a copy of the same one podcast episode, and it's now compounded by miles because you've distributed across platforms, as opposed to just uploading on YouTube, which is one, and there are billions of videos on YouTube to go by. So it's a matter of depth, and rather than just, surface, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Great questions. This is why I do this, and I want to make sure you guys, get these questions answered. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. Let's connect. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk. Let's make this happen. If you want to get serious and actually get this done, the link is available at the top. When you click that link, it's going to take you to my link specifically, and you can join the SEO newsletter. That's the first thing you'll see. The AI SEO newsletter, you'll see it there. And you can join the exclusive list. I send out emails and I go deep into insights. Like I really send out emails, and some people send me responses and I'm like, wow, okay, this is actually making sense. Sometimes I'm like, is this too much information? At this point, it's like the emails are like books, because they're little books or ebooks you can actually save. And I tell people, hey, start this emails because you're going to save this email for later and come back, because there's even SEO in email marketing. So if you want to have more things like this, I would love to know your comments, your thoughts, your feedback, because feedback is the best currency. And I always love to hear from you, because without you, I wouldn't be here. So thank you so much for being here, Mo. Fabian, thank you for the questions as well. Sunny, thank you for being here. Ashley, I appreciate you as well. Stock, Barry, thank you for being here. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Let's connect soon. And until we meet next time, have a blessed day. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. If you have reached this point of the episode, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the We Don't Play podcast show. I hope this has helped you, giving you some insight, because every time I come on here, or anytime I bring somebody on here, a guest, a speaker, anyone that is of relevance to you listening, is always going to give you educational value, definitely entertainment value, and most importantly, empowerment value. So thank you for listening to the We Don't Play podcast show every day. And if you want to reach out to me, you know where to find me. Click the links in the description, or go to info@playinc.online, info@playinc.online, and book a call. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk SEO. Let's talk marketing. Let's talk business. Let's talk scaling. And I look forward to meeting you and learning more about you and your business. Till we meet in the next episode, have a blessed evening. Have a blessed day, night, wherever you are in the world. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye for now. And don't forget, Jesus loves you.